Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here with us today. Um, Navtej, I have many memories of him through his writing and him as a diplomat and him as a very fine human being. Um, a friend who keeps you for life, basically. And he's always written about Punjab in various other forms. There have been other stories, other books, collections of short stories, etc. I mean, there's a plethora of writing that Navtej has continued to do. Because we just have half an hour with us, I'm going to dive straight into it. Navtej, because there will be people in the audience who may not have read Crimson Spring. Let's just seduce them into reading the book. Why don't you give us a short reading from one of the most powerful passages that you have?
Thank you, Mita. Nothing like a little seduction to liven up things, yeah? Well, this is the book, for those who haven't read it. It's Crimson Spring. It's a historical fiction book on the Jallianwala Bagh, and I'll talk more about it when Mita interrogates me for this next 20 minutes. But I thought I will just read out 2 or 3 paragraphs of the central scene of the book. And the central scene of the book is the night after the shooting, when, several hundred people were killed by Brigadier General Dyer and his men in cold blood, and several hundred were wounded and left to die. There was no medical assistance, and there was a curfew. So people could not come out to look for their loved ones. So this is the lady, the woman whose husband has died or is missing, and she comes to the Jallianwala Bagh to look for him at night. So I'll just read a couple of paragraphs of how she spends the night, not the entire chapter. Her name is Maya. The darkness thickened around Maya Day. She could see 2 or 3 lonely lanterns swaying some distance away. Once in a while, a lantern would stop, stoop low, and then, already dimming with disappointment, move on. What were the lanterns seeking, she wondered. Everybody was the same in death, one body the same as another, equally bereft of breath and life. Then she corrected herself as she looked down at her husband. Even in death, one needed to belong. Each person was looking for the one they had been born to, or given birth to, or shared a bed with, or perhaps just a meal. And then it goes on, and little later, slowly the night began to pass, marked by the striking of the clock on the hour. There was hardly any movement anymore, and only 1 or 2 lanterns could still be seen in the Bagh. There was no wind, as if it was staying away out of respect for the dead. With a last quivering croak, the bull too had fallen silent. There was a bull which had been shot and was croaking to death. Only the dogs barked, their noses covered with blood. Just after the clock struck 2, a peasant who lay not far away called out to her, "Mai, give a hand and lift up my leg." She held and raised his leg with both hands for a few moments to give him relief, and then gently put it down again. Her hands were covered with fresh blood from the gaping wound in the man's leg that had soaked through his pajama and plastered it to his skin. Finally, she was able to count 5 chimes of the clock. It seemed that for an hour or so she had fallen asleep where she sat, her husband's head in her lap. She looked around, bitter, burning bile rising in her throat. A weak dawn was hesitating across the sky. In the wan morning light, swarms of kites could be seen circling and swooping, ever lower. Joga Singh's body was stiff, and his legs stuck out at an unnatural angle. She tried to straighten it out and managed with some difficulty. Hundreds of bodies still lay around her as far as she could see, some with their faces to the sky, eyes open, mouths screaming silently. She had not realized that so many of them were children. The boy who had been begging her not to leave was quiet now, his painful gasp stilled forever. What she had not seen in the dark, she saw now. He had one arm around a dead child, no more than 3 years old. Many people were now in the bagh, searching for loved ones, helping those who were still alive. In a daze, she saw Lala Sundar Das and both his sons hurrying towards her. The boys were carrying a charpai between them. She touched the Lala's feet, and then he held her close as her body was racked with uncontrollable sobs. The boys put Joga Singh on the charpai, and the small group began to walk towards the narrow exit at the far end, just like all the other little groups on that killing field, carrying away their dead. So I stop.
The Jallianwala Bagh massacre still lives in our collective memory. I think it still makes bile rise up in our throats, whether we are talking about it in a fictionalized way or we read about it in some researched non-fiction. Navtej's book, Crimson Spring, I know for Navtej's skills, and having known him for over a couple of decades now, I know the kind of pain and research that must have gone into this book, because when you read it, it literally furnishes a screen-by-screen composition in front of you, and you can just vividly imagine what would have happened in reality that night. Crimson Spring takes us back into the lives of very ordinary people. You've told the story through 9 characters, and they're all picked up. They're not known people, like acclaimed personalities or freedom fighters or anything like that in this book. They're all 9 people he's picked up are like you and me, you know, who wouldn't have been known about. And he spun this whole tale around these 9 characters. Especially one of them is a real person, Udham Singh, who later then goes on to slay General Dwyer. And you say that you found inspiration in the lives of real people, and you've also navigated the space of their own emotional, psychological journeys. For those who haven't read the book, I really want you to tell the audience what made you pick up on these 9 characters.
Yeah, there are 9 major protagonists in this book. And as you said, I mean, one is a real life character. And this is historical fiction. It's not history. I try to make that point repeatedly because I don't want people thinking that everything in this book is history. Whatever is known of history, I have not changed. Whatever is not known or wherever there is emptiness for a fiction writer, I have tried to fill in. And I have tried to do it with normal people who are not actual. There's not it's not a Gandhi or a Satyapal or a Kichlu whose life I don't want to twist and tear up. So Udham Singh is one guy who's central to this book. He's actually runs through the book like a spine, and because he completes the narrative arc by shooting Michael O'Dwyer, who was the lieutenant governor, not the general who was in the Bagh, but the lieutenant governor of Punjab at that time, and who had sanctioned this essentially and forgiven it. So his life is along to what is known about him. But a lot of it is not known about his life, and there I have taken fictional liberties and dramatized his existence. The other characters, all are fictional. Some of them are inspired by real life, as you mentioned. For instance, there was the ADC to Brigadier General Dyer, who was standing behind him when he ordered the shooting. He was a young British sergeant. And he left a scrap of a memory with his family, which later went to another person who was researching Jallianwala Bagh, a Britisher. So I took that scrap of memory and created a different character as the ADC, gave him a backstory, gave him a life, gave him thoughts, gave him everything. And so that William Anderson Sargent becomes Nicholas Williams in the book. So, you know, some people, there was, for instance, a lawyer, a Sikh lawyer in Amritsar, guy called Gurdial Singh Salaria. And the lawyers were very active in those days. So they were in touch with the Britishers and they were in touch with people. They had a certain standing. So when the disturbances broke out 3 days before the massacre, these lawyers tried to keep the soldiers away from the ordinary crowds, tried to calm down the crowds. And he actually goes on a horse over the bridge of the railway line in Amritsar, trying to stop the crowd. So I took, and he gave testimony to the Gandhi Commission, which sat after the massacre. The British put on a committee of their own. Gandhi put on a committee of his own. And he gave testimony. It's about a 2 or 3 page testimony. I took that testimony and created another character called Gurnam Singh Gambhir, who was a lawyer, who had nothing to do with him. But you know, strange things happen in fiction. When this book came out, I got a call from somebody. He says, you know, this Salaria you've written about, you mentioned that you based this character on Salaria. His granddaughters want to meet you. So I said, oh my God, they're going to say, why did you use my grandfather's name, etc., etc. Instead, they gave us a lovely dinner at home. And then I asked them, what did happen to Mr. Salaria after this event? I don't know what has happened to him in life. And you won't believe it. The things they told me were what happened to this character. It is surreal. He also left law. He became a sort of Congressy Gandhian. He's wearing a white kurta pajama and so on and so forth. And this is what happens to this gentleman in this book. So there are, you know, so similarly there is another, the Chief Secretary of Punjab, J.P. Thompson, who was the right-hand man of Michael O'Dwyer. He was the top bureaucrat of Punjab. He left some diaries, which I found. And based on those diaries, I created a character who is completely the opposite of J.P. Thompson. J.P. Thompson was an arch-imperialist, hard colonial officer, killed them, beat them, imprisoned them, you know, that sort of chap. But the Porter, Hugh Porter, who is the chief secretary in this book, is a conflicted character. He does his duty, but he doesn't have his heart in it. You know, so there are things, you know, several things like that. Maya, who you heard about, she's based on one of the few women who gave testimony to the Gandhi Committee. Her name was Ratan Devi. And Ratan Devi's husband died, and she spent the night there. So there's a 1 paragraph of testimony or 1 page of testimony. And she gave her testimony. And I took that and then becomes Maya with a childhood, with, you know, incidents in her youth, with her marriage, with her, you know, entire journey. So it's a mix and match of all that.
So you've also used, there's the resonance of the Punjabi Kissa, the folk form of oral history that records and recounts remembered history of a people, of a culture. There's a certain vitality, there's a certain resilience of the Punjab that existed that day, that time, the everydayness of their life, and of the people, their pride, their various emotions and sentiments, and the determination to also take revenge. Why and how? I think that is why Crimson Spring differs from other historical fiction and makes it truly memorable for us. Was this a conscious choice, or was it also the way your characters just went from one to another?
No, it was a very conscious choice, because actually I was struggling with this book because I wanted to write a book which captured early 20th century Punjab and all the stuff, what you mentioned, the earthy rural life of Punjab, the poetry of Punjab, the kissas of Punjab, the language, the food, because all that is gone. It's gone, by the by the travel of time. It's gone because of the partition. We don't even know that Punjab. I wanted to recreate the geography of Punjab, not just the history. So in this book, for instance, there is no border. This is written in the 1919, and so in this book you see trains traveling across Jhelum and the Ravi, and and you have people living in the Sandalbar, which was the land of Heer Ranjha, and that is far and beyond. It's not accessible to us on the beyond the Chenab. So I wanted to do all that, and I didn't quite know how to do it. And then when this thought of Jallianwala Bagh started, I thought I would do a book on Jallianwala Bagh. And I said, okay, which one do I start first? And what do I do about Jallianwala? And then suddenly I realized that it was the same book. It was actually the same book, which I was trying to make into two books. Because Jallianwala Bagh was an event, but it was not an event in a vacuum. It was an event in which other things were happening around. The Gadar revolutionaries were there, like in this book. The freedom movement had begun, like in this book. The Singh Sabha, that is the reform movement of the Sikhs, had started. The canals had been made in Punjab. The people, the soldiers, the large majority of soldiers that went to the First World War from India were from Punjab. And it was all happening then. So I suddenly realized it's the same book. So that is why you see Jallianwala Bagh as the sort of central core of the book. But the stories are coming from different things. And in this, their entire culture, their life, their habits, their language, as translated into English, is hopefully coming through.
Well, it is. It is very evident when we go through the book. So when you were writing the book, you also seem to have taken the opportunity of correcting a few historical wrongs and also bringing attention to certain parallel freedom movements, which you've just mentioned, which otherwise don't get talked about too much. Was it an intention that you said you set that you'll restore the place of some of these freedom fighters and bring notice to them? Because so many unsung heroes are there.
Yeah. I don't know if it's, I don't give myself that much importance that I can, correct history or correct historical wrongs. But certainly I wanted to bring these people more to the front than they have. Particularly the revolutionaries. And I felt that, we have done tokenism with them without understanding them. Bhagat Singh is at the back of every three-wheeler in Delhi, in a little calendar with a photograph which is he never was that photograph, So they've given him all sorts of different turbans, they've given him all sorts of different, and he was not that man. And, Udham Singh, the statue of Udham Singh at Jallianwala Bagh, outside Jallianwala Bagh, it looks nothing like Udham Singh. It is sacrilege, to put up a statue of such a brave man in such a careless manner. Till about 4 years ago, when I visited Jallianwala Bagh, and there's a gallery of photos, they have a photo of Udham Singh, which is not of that Udham Singh. It is another Udham Singh who was a Gadar revolutionary, and they thought it's him. And all these learned directors of Jallianwala Bagh Trust, I wrote to a person, I don't know what happened, but the whole place has changed now. So, the mistake has gone somewhere. But yes, there were people whom we have not given sufficient recognition to their courage, to their contribution. Udham Singh was... when he did his act of revenge, nobody in India supported him. Mahatma Gandhi called it an act of insanity. And it was only after independence that Pandit Nehru changed his position on Udham Singh, and finally, of course, by the time his remains came back, 34 years later, he was given full national honors. But it took us a long time. So I did want to say that there were many things happening at that time, which all had a common, they were like different streams flowing into a major river, which became the freedom struggle. And for a time, they were all flowing together. Then they began to part again. Are we finished? Thanks.
No, I just